Good day, brothers and sisters, and welcome once again to the CMI School of Christ. And we're going to go ahead and continue with our class, The Great Mercy of God. And we have been in Leviticus chapter 1, verses 1 through 2, and verses 10. I think it was like 10 through 14. I must have copied it wrong here. But I've got just marked verse 10, and I think it's because I was mainly looking at just the term offering right there in that passage. We touched on it a couple classes ago. This class, what I'd like to do is just read some different Bible dictionaries, Bible commentaries, and just to kind of look at the different types of offerings there are. I think we we made mention of the offerings. If it wasn't the last, I think it might have been our last class. I even put a diagram out there just to make it a little easier with the offering and the type of offering it was. But this class, I'd really like to just look at the certain aspects of each offering itself, and just looking at them as a whole, and just looking at general things about them. So I want to just go ahead and start before time gets away from me. I'm not sure how long it'll take. But I'd like to just once again read Genesis chapter 15, verse 9 through 10, because here is where we have actually been. This is our main text right here, and out from here we've been looking at all these other passages. All right, Genesis chapter 15, verse 9, and he said unto him, and the Lord said unto Abram, take me an heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another, but the birds divided he not. And what I've been doing, I've basically been looking at each term that the Lord himself had Abram take. The first one was heifer. We looked at the term heifer, and actually the way we looked at it was by Strong's number. I did a Strong's number search. And right now we're with the term she-goat, and I've done a Strong's number search with that one, and it's Strong's number 5795, azeh, something like that in the Hebrew. And where we are right now is where it shows up in the passage of Leviticus, and it's all throughout Leviticus, and I think Numbers. I had it marked down just how far this particular term, where it was found, the main context of the offerings and sacrifices. So I'll go ahead and read Leviticus chapter 1, verses 1 through 2, and verse 10. And the Lord called unto Moses, and spake unto him out of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, if any man of you bring an offering unto the Lord, you shall bring your offering of the cattle, even of the herd, and of the flock. Now verse 10. And if his offering be of the flocks, namely of the sheep or of the goats, and there's our term right there, azeh, Strong's number 7133, a goat for a burnt offering, he shall bring it a male without blemish. And the only difference right here is that when it first shows up in Genesis chapter 15, verse 9 and 10, they are females that are being brought, except for the ram. It's the heifer is a female, and the she-goat is a female. And right here, they're all males, a sheep or of the goats. If his offering be of the flocks, namely of the sheep or of the goats, for a burnt offering, he shall bring it a male without blemish from the female goats, or from the female sheep. It will be a male that will be offered. Okay, and so that's just one of the main differences. And the very first Bible commentary right here, study Bible commentary, it's going to actually say that. I wasn't even looking at it, just kind of how it showed up in order. This is the Apologetic Study Bible by Holman Bible Publishers for Leviticus chapter 1, verse 2. It says, the 5 kinds of animals specified for the burnt offering, specifically for the burnt offering, the bull, the sheep, the goat, turtle dove, and pigeon, are exactly the 5 animals Abraham offered to God in Genesis 15:9. Okay? And they're exactly the 5 kinds of animals. 5 animals, but it didn't really specify whether female or male. But the difference, once again, is that there was a female heifer and of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old. Whereas here in Leviticus, these are all males. It's a bull, male. It's a sheep or a goat, male. And then, of course, the turtle dove and pigeon. But that just makes it real clear right there. And I kind of looked at it, and they were showing up again, and I knew they would. And see, that's the thing, is that when the Lord establishes something, he's going to kind of define it a little more later on down the path. When he brings something into view, later on, he's just going to kind of give it shape and definition, if you will. And really, as I stated in our last class, the Lord always presents his Son. The Lord always presents Christ. And then we go on unto knowing this one whom he himself has presented, knowing him more clearly, knowing him as God knows him. Okay? So that was the Apologetics Study Bible for that passage. This is, and I think I mentioned this in a couple classes ago. This is a quote from the Talmud. It says, he who sacrifices a whole offering shall be rewarded for a whole offering. He who offers a burnt offering shall be rewarded for a burnt offering. But he who offers humility to God and man shall be rewarded with a reward as if he had offered all the sacrifices in the world. And this is Christ himself, the sum total of all the sacrifices. Because once again, Jesus said this, they testify of me. And not only that, but just right here, even where it says it, but he who offers humility to God and man, what was the confession of Christ himself? Not I, but the Father. And right there you find true humility. Right there you find true humility. And when later on, when the different apostles confessed the same thing, just looking at one, the Apostle Paul, when he said, "It is not I, but Christ who liveth in me," that is ultimately the reality as God knows it to be. That is the truth as God knows him to be. So in essence, the Apostle Paul is declaring the mind of the Lord. Okay? So just going on here, this is once again the Apologetics Study Bible for Leviticus 1:2. And I'm not sure how I got these separated or if they were in the same passage. I'm not sure. But for some reason, I found them at different points, but still searching Leviticus chapter 1, verse 2. Oh yeah, right here it's talking about just examples of blemishes and particular animals with blemishes, because the Lord was very specific that the offering will be a perfect offering without spot or blemish. And I did make mention of this, I think, a couple weeks ago, and I didn't actually read it from here. I just kind of, mentioned it from memory. But I'll go ahead and read it because it's really specific, very specific. Now, concerning an unblemished animal, it just starts, an unblemished animal would be an animal free from blindness, from injury, maimed condition, from irregular members, or from warts or festering sores, or damaged testicles. And all these terms were found in Leviticus chapter 2, chapter 22, verses 22 through 24. The Greek translation renders the members, renders the Hebrew for unblemished as amomos, something like that. This adjective is applied to Jesus in the New Testament, Hebrews chapter 9, verse 4, and 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 19. 1 Peter chapter 1, let's go ahead and look in verse 19. Yeah. Let's start with verse... Let's start with verse 18. Excuse me. Verse 18. For as much as you know that you were not, and this is from 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 18. For as much as you know that you were not redeemed with corruptible things as silver and gold from your vain conversation by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. So very perfect. God himself offers the perfect offering. God himself offers his Son the perfect offering, a willing sacrifice. And I love the way he mentions it right here. Peter does, as of a lamb, a willing sacrifice. Not like, it's funny because we're looking at the she-goat right now, but not like a goat that is resisting everything, but as a lamb, a willing sacrifice. So right there, those are just some examples of unblemished animals. And for one, irregular members, the majority, if not everyone, has a hand that's larger than the other, or a little longer than the other, a limb longer than the other. This is like normal. There's no perfect person, and God made it that way, that we may find perfection in his Son. Once again, ultimately, there was no true, perfect animal sacrifice or vegetable sacrifice, that we may find the perfect offering, the perfect sacrifice in his very own Son. I like it, the way it talks even in Hebrews, that the blood of bulls and of goats could not take away sin. It could not do anything. Yet the testimony is right there, God declaring his Son in the midst of those sacrifices and offerings. And yet those sacrifices and offerings in reality could not take away sins. Only Christ himself, the perfect offering, whom God himself offered. Right? Let's go on. This is the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary, and this is for the term sacrifice and offerings. Excuse me. It says, and it just basically mentions them. The burnt, the grain, the peace, the sin, and the guilt offerings composed the basic sacrificial system of Israel. And that's it. Those 5 offerings are the basic offerings, the basic sacrifices. Those are like, from there they branch off and they'll get more specific, but those are the 5 main offerings and sacrifices. These sacrifices were commonly used in conjunction with each other and were carried out on both an individual and a corporate basis. So it touched the whole, and it also touched each individual. And I was just thinking, just right there where it says individual and corporate, it's as an individual, we must know this one, Christ himself, who is the perfect offering, the perfect sacrifice. And I jotted down Christ in you. And as a whole, as a body, we must know this perfect one, this perfect offering, this perfect sacrifice. And once again, Christ in the church, in the body. So in both aspects, in both ways, we are to know the Lord on a, how shall I put it, on a corporate level and on an individual level. And my thought is, unless the Lord changes it, how can we know the Lord on a corporate level except we first know him on an individual level? But that's my own thought at this time. You know, how can the whole body know the Lord if none of the members are knowing the Lord? You kind of see, that's how I kind of get that. But anyway, that was my comment on that. Were carried out on both an individual and a corporate basis. The sacrificial system taught the necessity of dealing with sin and at the same time demonstrated that God had provided a way for dealing with sin. And I was just thinking, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but at some point I just kind of thought this, and with the burnt offering, with the olah, remember the whole thing was consumed. The only thing that was basically given to the priests were the skins, the hide. And I was just thinking, with Adam and Eve in the garden, after they partook of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, after they partook of the tree of death, the Lord himself offers a sacrifice. I believe, I'm not sure if it says it, forgive me, I haven't searched it out, I haven't looked it up, but I believe it was a whole burnt offering. The whole thing came unto God, and what remained was the skin of the sacrifice with which the Lord himself clothed Adam and Eve. And it's still a type of Christ, being clothed with Christ. So I thought that was just really neat, and I don't want to go any further with that, just because that's all that was on my heart. It's just when I was reading concerning the whole burnt offering, the olah, that's all. The whole thing was consumed. The whole thing was for God, and the only thing that remained was the skin. So that's just something to consider. Now going on, this is the IVP New Dictionary of Biblical Theology, InterVarsity Press, for the term offering. And this is under the heading or the subtitle, Structure and Themes. And I liked this, and I want to make mention of this because it really caught my attention. And I like it when things catch my attention. Well, for one thing, I believe it's the mind of the Lord just drawing my own heart. I believe it's the Spirit of the Lord drawing my own heart for his end and his purpose. So right here, this is under the subtitle Structure and Themes. Chapter 8 describes an installation of the priests and concerning Exodus. Yeah, concerning Exodus, and then it says, chapter 1. I'll just read the whole paragraph. Exodus 25 through 40 deals with the construction of the tabernacle. Then in Leviticus, 5 types of offering are prescribed for it. Then chapters 1 through 7 of Leviticus, there we go, can be subdivided into 2 subsections. Chapter 1 through chapter 6, verse 7, and chapter 6, verse 8 through chapter 7, verse 37. The first is concerned with how to approach the Lord with offerings. The second with safeguarding the holy things. And then it goes on right here, the very next sentence. Chapter 8 describes the installation in Leviticus. Chapter 8 describes the installation of the priests. And chapter 9 recounts the first service on the 8th day. That is, after the 7-day ordination of the priests. And I just thought that was just really well put. How chapter 9, how they stated it, chapter 9 recounts the first service on the 8th day. And the whole, remember, I'm not sure if it was the last class or the class before, we were talking about Noah. Yes, we were talking about Noah and how that he offered unto the Lord, but he made his offering after the flood and after the burial. And then he offered unto the Lord, and it was a sweet smelling sacrifice unto the Lord. And here is the very first service after the Lord mentions all these types of offerings and sacrifices, sets the whole thing up, and the very first time they begin, the very first service they have is on the 8th day, a day that is outside of time, a day, if you will, that is the new creation, Christ himself. So I love that the way, I'm not sure if that's why they mentioned it that way or if it's actually in the scripture mentioned that day, the 8th day. It well may be. But I just love it that I found it there where it says that the first service concerning these offerings and sacrifices that the Lord set up in Leviticus was on the 8th day. So that was just really neat to me. Now going on with the same Bible dictionary, New Dictionary of Biblical Theology, the IVP, under the subtitle Theology, it says, the first 5 chapters of Leviticus prescribe the way in which the Israelites are to approach the Lord with their offerings. And it just got my attention that there was a particular manner, there was a way to approach the Lord with these particular offerings. You needed the offering, and then you had to approach in a particular way. And here goes once again my heart, where Jesus says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes unto the Father but by me. Here you have Christ himself, who is the perfect offering, the perfect sacrifice. And here you have Christ himself, who himself is the very way unto God, to approach God, to come unto God. So I thought that was really neat also. Continuing on under the subtitle Theology, it says, the material of the offerings are the Israelites' ordinary foodstuffs. God does not need to be fed. Rather, an offering expresses the belief that the Israelites need to be fed and so be given life by God. And they mentioned that, and I started thinking about it, and there's different places, I think it was either Isaiah or Jeremiah, where the Lord is saying, do I really want to eat the, bulls and drink the blood and all this stuff? I don't want that. And just thinking about it, is there anything that we can offer unto God? Is there anything that God needs, not wants, but needs? And really, it is us who have the need. And our need is he himself. So in a sense, when I read that, I thought, wow, that's pretty neat. It's like the offerer coming unto the Lord and saying, I need you, Lord. I need you to be unto me my total dedication unto you. I need you to be unto me my communion with you. I need you to be unto me the first fruits unto you. I need you to be unto me my covering for sins unto you. Can you see it? So I was just thinking of it that way. And I love it because Christ is made unto us all that we could never be and never find in anything less than God himself. Remember, a perfect offering, a perfect sacrifice. Never to be found could not be found apart from Christ himself, who is that very offering and sacrifice. Okay, and going on, there is some overlap in the rites associated with the various offerings. And once again, there were the 5 main offerings. And basically, they're saying that some things kind of overlap the way they do things. For example, the blood, the burning of fat, etc. The meaning of each offering is to be found in the elements most strongly emphasized. And I think that's how they kind of separate them, well, to whatever degree, and come up with these 5. Because a lot of the things concerning the offerings kind of overlap. You'll find some of the same things in the burnt offering that are going on with the peace offering or the grain offering and so on. So the way they kind of distinguish them is basically the elements that are most strongly emphasized. That's how they distinguish the particular offering it is from one of the 5. All right. Now, what I like to do right now is basically read from the New Dictionary of Biblical Theology, the IVP, and the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary. And what I did, I grouped them. I did my Spanish class and I didn't group them. And I was like searching through my notes just to bring them together. But thank the Lord, I grouped them this time for our English class, so it'll be a little easier for you guys. And what I want to do is just basically go through each of the offerings and just read a little bit about it, just kind of so we can kind of get an idea of, once again, of the elements concerning it, what they're about, what each one's kind of about. And I may have mentioned in a very general way before in previous classes, but these make it just a little bit more specific on some things. So I really wanted to do that. And that was the main thing that I wanted to do during this class, is go through these. And like I said, it may not take long at all, but because I already have them grouped, it sure took a long time in my Spanish class. Anyway, so this is the first offering, the burnt offering that's mentioned. And I'm just mentioning them in order of mention. The burnt offering, and this is the IVP New Dictionary of Biblical Theology under the term offering, and it mentions the burnt offering found in Leviticus 1. Atonement. The motives for making a burnt offering are various: atonement for sin, so it can be atonement for sin, joy, thanksgiving, etc. And here's the key thing about the burnt offering: but it primarily symbolizes the total dedication of the offerer. Though all these things can be there, it primarily symbolizes the total dedication of the offerer. And ultimately, there is only one who is totally dedicated unto God, and this is Christ his Son. And if anyone is born again and believes they are dedicated unto God in whatever way, manner, or fashion, then it is Christ in you, the one who is dedicated unto God. And I think we often, I may have mentioned this in one of the last classes, we often confuse ourselves with the Lord. And I'll give an example. There is only one who truly serves God, and that is his Son. That's what God told Moses to tell Pharaoh. Israel is my son, singular. Let my son go that he may serve me. So ultimately, there is only truly one who serves his Father, and this is Christ his Son. And if we, for whatever reason, find ourselves, quote unquote, serving God, then ultimately we will, if we continue on to knowing the Lord, will confess, as all the others did, it is not I, but Christ in me. Because truly there is only one who serves God. And there is only one who is, here we are, totally dedicated unto God, and that's his Son. And Jesus said this, the Father hath not left me. I always do those things that please him. He's not left me. I always do those things that please him. Okay. And going on, with the burnt offering, the burnt offering, this is the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary, the Ola, offered in the morning and in the evening, as well as on special days such as the Sabbath, the new moon, and the yearly feasts. So this is one of the main offerings. The animal for the sacrifice could be a young bull, lamb, goat, turtle dove, or young pigeon. And there you go, all the animal types, kinds that are mentioned in Genesis chapter 15. But it had to be a perfect and complete specimen. The type of animal chosen for the sacrifice seems to be dependent on the financial ability of the one who brings the offering. And we may have touched on this last class. Basically, that you, on an individual basis, you offered the most expensive animal that you could afford. So the whole thought there is that it has to cost you something. There has to be a cost unto you. And it picks it up back here, further on down. It says, when Araunah offered to David his threshing floor, oxen, and wood without cost, and that's the key right there, without cost, so that David could sacrifice, David refused. His explanation was that he could not offer burnt offerings that cost him nothing. The passage is 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 18 through 25. And that's the whole thing there. There has to be a cost in the one offering. And see, the thing is, and I know we've heard this probably since Bible school. I really didn't go to Bible school. I was born again at the age of 20. But probably from Bible school, you probably heard this. Jesus paid it all. There was a cost. And see, that's the thing. There was and is a cost. And Christ himself paid the cost. He literally paid it all. We just have no clue of what all he paid. You know, everything that God required, the Son himself. The Son himself fulfilled in himself that God the Father may be satisfied. And so, in that respect, what does it cost us? Well, for the one who's not born again, what it costs the one who's not born again to receive life, it costs them their condition of death. For the one who is born again, who has received life, because they have received Christ, what it costs us is our ignorance. And if you look at it that way, then it really doesn't cost us anything. Christ himself has provided everything of any worth and of any value. Okay, let's go on. This is once again, back to the New Dictionary of Biblical Theology. And basically, I'm going to be going back and forth with these two different dictionaries here. And this is the grain cereal offering. And this one's found in Leviticus chapter 2. The emphasis here is on the pleasing aroma, which is the culminating element in the burnt offering. So see, you have a little bit of overlapping there. It stresses the renewal of one's dedication to the Lord. The renewal of one's dedication to the Lord. Okay. Now, this is the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary for the same offering, the grain offering, the minka. or as a King James translates it, the meat offering. And that always used to confuse me because I thought it was meat like as we think meat to be like chicken or beef or something like that, meat, but it's actually grain, right? Offering from the harvest of the land. Offering from the harvest of the land, the only type that requires no bloodshed. This particular offering is the only type that requires no bloodshed whatsoever. It goes on, while no reason is given for the grain offering, it may have symbolized the recognition of God's blessing in the harvest, recognizing God having blessed because there is a harvest. Okay? The bringing of a representation portion of the grain harvest was another outward expression of devotion. Grain offerings as well as drink offerings or libations of wine accompanied all burnt offerings and peace offerings. All burnt offerings and peace offerings. So there you go. Now you've got a couple of offerings going on at the same time. So if there was a burnt offering, there was a grain offering. If there was a peace offering, there was a grain offering. So they kind of overlap, but once again, they're just a little different. They've got little things specific about them to make them a little different. Now, once again, where is it? It may have symbolized the recognition of God's blessing in the harvest. The bringing of a representative portion of the grain harvest was another expression of devotion. Okay, and it stresses the renewal of one's dedication to the Lord, and that's renewal. Where Christ, I don't believe he had to be renewing his dedication unto his Father. I believe he had the perfect, and peace offerings coming up next. He had the perfect relationship with his Father. Never anything having to be renewed. Remember, once again, Jesus said this, the Father hath never left me, for I do always those things that please him. The next one, the next offering, this is the peace offering or the communion offering or the well-being offering. Found in Leviticus chapter 3. This is the New Dictionary of Biblical Theology. Once again, IVP New Dictionary of Biblical Theology. The sacrifice emphasizes communion following reconciliation with the Lord and or the dedication of the offerer to the Lord. Emphasizes communion following reconciliation with the Lord and or the dedication of the offerer to the Lord. Now, this is the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary for the same term, the peace offering. And it says, the peace offering, Zebach Shelamim, the well-being, shared fellowship. This is just different Bibles translate it different way. Different Bible versions translate that different ways, like peace offering or well-being offering or shared offering or fellowship offering, consisting of the sacrifice of a bull, cow, lamb, or goat that had no defect. And then it goes on, a peace offering was to be brought in the response to an unexpected blessing, a thank offering, or an answer to prayer, a vow offering, or for general thankfulness, a free will offering. The idea of thanksgiving was associated with the peace offering. Once again, the peace offering, communion offering, well-being offering. The idea of thankfulness or thanksgiving, let me go ahead and kind of circle that because that's important. The idea of thanksgiving was associated with a peace offering. Then it goes on. Oh, and this is the part I love right here. It goes on and it says this. It often accompanied other sacrifices in celebration of events such as the dedication of the temple or spiritual renewal, the wave offerings and the heave offerings were associated with the peace offerings. And these are very important, and I'll tell you why in just a second. The wave offerings and the heave offerings were associated with the peace offerings. They were portions presented or lifted up before the Lord, mentioned first as part of the priestly ordination ceremony, whereas the wave offering, I'll just go ahead and circle that. Whereas the wave offering was always offered in the sanctuary, the heave offering could be presented anywhere. And I want to take a little pause real quick to look for this other definition concerning the heave offering here. Now, where were we? This is the peace offering that we're looking at. And once again, the idea of thanksgiving was associated with the peace offering. The wave offerings and the heave offerings were associated with the peace offerings, okay? Whereas the wave offering was always offered in the sanctuary, the temple, the tabernacle, because that's where we're at the moment, the tabernacle or the temple, with the idea God in the midst. The heave offering could be presented anywhere, okay? Very important right there. It got my attention. This is Easton's Revised Bible Dictionary for the term offering, and it mentions several different offerings, but what I've got marked right here is the heave offering, and I want to read that. Some of the rabbis attach to the word the meaning of elevation concerning the heave offering, and refer it to the heave offering, which consists in presenting the offering by motion up and down, distinguishing from the wave offering, which consists in a repeated movement in a horizontal direction. So here we go. The heave offering, motion up and down unto the Lord, and then you've got the wave offering in a horizontal direction, side by side. And remember what we read just a while ago in Holman's Illustrated Bible Dictionary concerning the peace offering, where it talked about the heave offering and the wave offering. The wave offering was always offered in the sanctuary, in the tabernacle, the temple. The heave offering could be presented anywhere. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and keep on reading here. Easton's Revised Bible Dictionary. The heave offering, which consisted in presenting the offering by a motion up and down, distinguished from the wave offering, which consisted in a repeated movement in a horizontal direction. A wave offering to the Lord as ruler of earth, a heave offering to the Lord as ruler of heaven. And when I read that, we'll look at my diagram in a second. When I read that, I thought, well, anyone can confess Jesus is Lord of heaven. There you go. Heave offering anywhere. But to confess that the Lord is Lord of earth, Lord of heaven and earth, has to happen, where does it? In the sanctuary, in the temple, in the tabernacle. I mean, actually tabernacle, because where we're at the moment. But this happens here. See, in essence, we can all confess, because it could be done anywhere. Jesus is Lord of heaven. He's risen. He is Lord of heaven, anywhere. But to confess and declare that he is Lord of earth, the wave offering, Christ has to be, must be revealed as such in the heart. in the earth, in the sanctuary, in the tabernacle, in the temple. And I know that the majority will say, Christ is risen. Jesus is risen from the grave. And it is so very true. It is so very true. But of those who will declare that reality, who will declare, and he liveth in me? Christ is risen from the grave, and he liveth in me. Thus being Lord of heaven and Lord of earth. And that it just grabbed all my attention right there, just with those two different types of the heave offering and the wave offering. It just, for me, it was like an explosion. And it all has to do with the peace offering, because it's the wave offering and the heave offering were associated with the peace offerings. The wave offering was always offered in the sanctuary. The heave offering could be presented anywhere. And see, even here, even just in these the facts of the matter, you see it. The heart must be directed unto him who is risen. And when the heart turns to the Lord, the veil is removed, and God the Father once again communicates his perfect word in the midst. His perfect word who is present. His perfect word who is present. I love that. All right. Going on. Let's see, where were we? The peace offering. Yes. All right, going on to our next one. The purification offering, which is found in Leviticus chapter 4, verses 1 through chapter 5, verses 13, and I think it has chapter 12, verse 8. It has etc. The purification offering. And once again, the first three, the burnt offering, the grain offering, and the peace offering have really don't, the main emphasis is not dealing with sin. These last two deal with sin. Okay? The purification offering, this sacrifice expiates inadvertent sins, basically not deliberate sins, so-called sins of negligence, and severe types of natural uncleanness. Okay? And that was the New Dictionary of Biblical Theology, IVPs. And this is the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary. It says, concerning the sin offering, the chatat, something like that. This was designed to purify the sanctuary from sin that was committed unintentionally, and thereby allow God to continue dwelling with his people. Let me read that again. This sin offering was designed to purify the sanctuary. This is the very first thing they mention concerning the sin offering. Designed to purify the sanctuary from sin that was committed unintentionally, and thereby allow God to continue dwelling with his people. So here you have God in heaven says, have them build me a sanctuary that I may dwell in the midst of them. A new heaven, a new earth. So here they have the sanctuary now, the tabernacle, and God is in the midst of his body, because all the body of Israel is encamped around the tabernacle. And here is Christ. I mean, God himself is dwelling in the midst, and God himself makes it so that, listen, he may continue dwelling in the midst, because God could not look upon sin. Remember, there is no communion with light and darkness. Okay? Christ himself became this perfect sin offering, this perfect purification offering, whereby the fellowship that we have been brought into, us who are born again, is an unbroken fellowship. The communion we have as those who are born again, as those who are believers, of those who are of the body of Christ, have an unbroken communion with God. Remember, the Apostle Paul said it, and I may have mentioned this a couple classes ago, that you may have fellowship with us. And truly, our fellowship is with the Father and with the Son. The fellowship of the Father and the Son. And this is the fellowship that we have been brought into because of Christ, who has brought us into this fellowship, this perfect fellowship. And yet it is not our fellowship. It is the fellowship of the Father and the Son. Okay? It is a perfect fellowship. And Christ offering himself as this sin offering, as this purification offering, him being pure, guarantees this pure offering, this pure sacrifice, guarantees he will not leave you nor forsake you. Do you see how now all the scriptures begin to come alive? I will not leave you nor forsake you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Why? Because I myself have covered the basis. Myself have covered the requirements and the conditions. I myself have met the requirements and the conditions. I will never leave you nor forsake you. The issue is we have no clue who is present in the midst, who will never leave us nor forsake us. We have no clue him who is our life. But the Spirit of the Lord, the Spirit of truth, continually works to continue to prepare the ground of our heart, the ground of our soul. Listen, that our heart may turn unto the Lord of heaven, that the Lord of earth may be revealed. And I love that. And it's not based upon us. Remember this sin offering, it had to be pure. It had to be unblemished. No irregularities whatsoever. So that, why? Designed to purify the sanctuary from sin that was committed unintentionally, and thereby allow God to continue dwelling with his people. Christ, who is made unto us sanctification. All these made unto us righteousness. All these things, all the requirements, all the stipulations, Christ himself has met them in his one perfect sacrifice. The only thing now is to know him who is present. Who is present, listen, and never leaving. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I love that. It's just beautiful, and we have no clue. We completely have no clue. I remember once when I was in Bible school, and I know my time's starting to run out here. I've got a couple more pages of notes. But I remember one time at Bible school, I don't know what I did. I think I was just not having a good week at all. I think everything I tried to do to help others, everything was just falling apart. I think I was working on, I think I remember it. I was working on Molly's, on her Toyota 4Runner. The windows wouldn't, roll down. And there were electronic windows, and I did something, and apparently one of the wires touched the inside door panel and shorted out the whole thing and blew one of those big fuses, and I didn't know that happened. All I knew is that when I tried to turn the ignition on now, nothing happened. Before, at least the thing turned on and ran. Now nothing happened. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? So there was like this whole string of events, things that were happening that were totally contrary. And here's here's the voice of the enemy, the voice of the deceiver. See, God doesn't love you. See, you've messed up so many times. He's just showing you right here that no, he doesn't, he's not with you, all this stuff and blah, 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 blah. Well, that's just the voice of the enemy. What the Lord showed me was basically this. You will find my acceptance in the cross. And I love that. If you want to find your acceptance anywhere, if you want to find my love, whether it be true or not, you must look to the cross. Here where God himself offers his son, his only son, whom he loved. And after that, I was so convinced of the Spirit of the Lord that I said in my own heart, it doesn't matter what happens. I know God loves me because Christ offered himself. And see, not only with that, Christ is in us who are born again, and he is not leaving. He does not come and go. No. He has made provision. He has done all these things. He's met the requirements. He has met everything that was required of God. And he is now present. And he is not going anywhere. The Lord is in his temple, right? The Lord is in his temple. The thing is to know this one who is present, who fills the temple with himself. All right, let's see. It's continuing on with the sin offering, the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary. Its nature varied according to who committed the sin. It could be a male goat, female goat, or a lamb, 2 turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons. When the priest or the congregation sinned, the blood was sprinkled 7 times before the veil in the sanctuary. I just thought that was interesting. And for others who sinned, the sprinkling of the blood before the veil was omitted. The same internal organs that were designed for burning in the peace offering, and here we have some overlap, were likewise designated in this sacrifice. The rest of the animal was taken outside the camp to the place where the ashes of the sacrifices were disposed, and there it was burned. Okay, so there, with this particular offering, the rest of the animal was taken outside the camp, just as Christ, who offered himself as a willing sacrifice, was taken outside the camp, who suffered outside the camp, to the place where the ashes of the sacrifices were disposed, and there it was burned. Okay? And once again, the sin offering mainly to deal with sins that were committed unintentionally. This sacrifice expiates not non-deliberate sins, unintentional sins that were not deliberate. Let's see, sin. They were called sins of negligence and such. All right, our last offering here is the guilt offering, or the reparation offering. And this is the IVP, New Dictionary of Biblical Theology. And it can be found in Leviticus chapter 5, verses 14 through chapter 6, verses 7. This sacrifice expiates transgressions such as those against the holy things, those against the divine commandments, and those against God himself. That is the violation of an oath. All right? Transgressions such as those. So it expiates transgressions. Now the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary for the same offering, the guilt offering, the asham, the trespass offering. It says, this offering seems to overlap somewhat with the sin offering. The guilt offering is called a sin offering. The guilt offering was concerned supremely with restitution. Someone who took something illegally was expected to repay it in full, plus 20% of the value, and then bring a ram for the guilt offering. Other instances in which the guilt offering was prescribed included the cleansing of a leper, and then it goes on, broken, and for the renewing of a Nazirite vow that had been broken. Okay, I don't know if that has anything to do with Samson or not, because I don't remember any offering with that one. But then again, might have to reread it to make sure. All right, now I had already read the Easton's Revised Bible Dictionary earlier concerning the heave offering. Once again, the heave offering, upward, downward motion unto the Lord. The wave offering, side by side. The heave offering, Lord of heaven, and the heave offering, Lord of earth. All right? And see, here's the thing, my brothers and sisters. Though we can confess Jesus is Lord of heaven and earth, I think we just confess it because we can read it. It's different when it affects you personally in this respect. In this respect, the Apostle Paul, he confessed, listen, out of an experiential encounter, out of a face-to-face experiential encounter with the Lord himself, and thus he confessed out from that. You can find it in the book of Galatians. But when it pleased God, here's the encounter, but when it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb, called me by his grace, unto what end, unto what purpose? To reveal his Son in me. The results of that, I preach him. Okay? Now, based upon that face-to-face encounter, the Apostle Paul now declares, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, the vessel, yet not I the life of the vessel, but Christ liveth in me. Here Paul declares basically the Lord of heaven and the Lord of earth. Christ liveth in me. Finding the treasure of heaven in an earthen vessel. We may touch on that in a later class. But it was all out from, based upon, a face-to-face personal encounter with the living one, the one who lives, Christ himself. Okay, this is our last dictionary that we're going to be looking at, IVP, Dictionary of Biblical Imagery. The other ones were Dictionary of Biblical Theology. This is the IVP, Dictionary of Biblical Imagery for the term offering. And I love this. I mean, even touches on this, and I think I did mention this in a couple classes back. No one shall appear before me empty-handed. That's how it starts off. The Lord says twice during the theophany at Mount Sinai in Exodus 23 and Exodus 34. Offerings were an integral part of Israelite worship. And from Cain and Abel down to Revelation, the image of the offering permeates the Bible. From the very beginning unto the very end, or for y'all, from the very beginning unto the very end, you have offering. Then it goes down in another paragraph. Worship and offering are inextricably linked in the Old Testament. The Pentateuch, particularly Leviticus chapter 1 through 7, describes several different sorts of offerings. The burnt offering, that was the centerpiece, I love this, the centerpiece of temple worship. The sin offering that restored a person or place that had become unclean. The guilt offering that made restitution for an unwitting, unintentional, committed misdeed. The thank offering that offered the Lord gratitude. And it goes on. The law specifies the characteristics of an acceptable offering in great detail, through though the primary requirement is always, I like this, always that the lamb or grain or bread offered be the very highest quality. You couldn't just offer God whatever. And you couldn't just offer God whatever that was not domestic. Remember? Several passages in the Psalms declare that the Lord prefers an inward offering and that he has no need of any offering. And here's Psalm, let me go ahead and look at that, because I looked that up and I thought that's a good passage to read. This is Psalm, if I can find it, Psalm chapter 50, verse 12. I think it has verse 12 through 14. If I were hungry, I would not tell thee, for the world is mine and the fullness thereof. Will I eat, here we go, will I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? Offer unto God thanksgiving and pay thy vows unto the Most High. And then I've got Hebrews. I've got to make a big old star because I make mention of this. I have Hebrews, the passage of Hebrews chapter 10, verse 1 through 14. For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never, with those sacrifices which they offered year by year, continually make the comers thereunto perfect. For then would they not have ceased to be offered. For then would they not have ceased to be offered? It's a question mark. Because that the worshippers, once purged, should have no more conscience of sins. But in those sacrifices, there is a remembrance again made of sins every year, for it is not possible that the blood of bulls and of goats should take away sins. Wherefore, when he cometh into the world, speaking of Christ himself, he saith, sacrifice and offering thou wouldest not, but a body hast thou prepared me. In burnt offerings and in sacrifices for sin thou hast had no pleasure. Then said I, Lo, I come. In the volume of the book it is written of me to do thy will, O God. Above which he said, sacrifice and offering and burnt offerings and offerings for sin, covering all the offerings, covering all the sacrifices, and offering for sin thou wouldst not, neither hadst pleasure therein, which are offered by the law. Then said he, Lo, I come to do thy will, O God. He taketh away the first, that he may establish the second, by the which will we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once and for all. And every priest standeth daily ministering and offering oftentimes the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. But this man, this one, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down at the right hand of God, from henceforth expecting till his enemies be made his footstool. For by one offering he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified. And how hath he done this? He himself is our perfection. Remember the confession of one who has a face-to-face encounter with the living God, in whom Christ is revealed. Remember, not I, but Christ. Not I the life, but Christ the life in me. Not I perfection, but Christ himself, the perfection that God has required and God has desired. So, I love that. The Lord, he himself making a way, becoming the way, becoming the offering, becoming the way, becoming everything that has ever been needed and ever been required of God. Christ himself has done this. He has made it so that in being born again, Christ is present and he remains present. I will never leave you nor forsake you. May the Spirit of the Lord continue preparing the ground of our heart, the ground of our soul, that our heart may turn unto Christ above, that our heart being turned, God may reveal the treasure in the midst, the treasure in an earthen vessel, that we may declare the Lord of heaven and the Lord of earth, Christ himself. Amen. Amen. We'll end for this class. We'll see you in our next class. Lord bless. Amen.